The distant planet of Zurin had once been a thriving center of wisdom, wealth, and power. Its towering castles gleamed under the light of two suns, and its bustling cities were filled with beings of extraordinary grace and intellect. Zurin was a jewel of the galaxy, a planet respected and feared by countless civilizations. However, all this had changed. The royal family, which once ruled over countless star systems, had been slowly crumbling. For years, political instability and internal strife had torn through the ancient empire, and now only one royal remained, Princess Lyra, the last surviving heir of the once mighty Zurinian dynasty. Her beauty was legendary. Her skin shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, her eyes were an impossible shade of violet, and her long silver hair seemed to float around her as if gravity had little control over it. But none of her outer beauty could hide the loneliness and despair that filled her heart. Lyra had been raised to be a ruler, to marry a powerful and influential suitor who could help restore the kingdom. But with each passing year, those suitors became more corrupt, more driven by political gain than by any true sense of love or duty. The princess, frustrated and disillusioned with the endless parade of candidates, issued a statement that would shake the galaxy to its core. "I will not marry for power or politics," she declared in front of the council. "I will marry for love. I will not settle for anything less than a partner who understands my heart. Let the universe hear my call. I ask, who will marry me?" Her words spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Many mocked her, calling it a foolish whim from a pampered princess. Some believed it to be an impossible dream. But in one corner of the galaxy, a human diplomat named Marcus sat, watching the broadcast. Marcus was not a prince or a king. He was not a military leader or a conqueror. He was an ordinary man, sent to Zurin as part of the Galactic Council's diplomatic efforts. His mission was to maintain peace, to facilitate communication between the many different races of the galaxy. He was respected, but only in the way a quiet, intelligent man is respected, not for his strength but for his wisdom. When Marcus first heard the princess's proclamation, he laughed it off. It seemed absurd. What chance did a mere human have in winning the heart of such an extraordinary being? But something about her words stuck with him. He wasn't sure why, but there was a pull in his chest, a feeling he couldn't ignore. The way she spoke about love, as if it was the one thing in the universe she was truly searching for, struck a chord deep within him. Over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The more he thought about it, the more he felt an unexpected desire to go to her, to meet her, to prove to himself that he was more than just a simple diplomat. He wondered what it would be like to stand before such an incredible woman and show her that there was more to him than what people saw on the surface. But there was also fear of rejection, fear that he was too ordinary. He wasn't tall and muscular like some of the other suitors who had already arrived on Zurin. He didn't have wealth or power. He had nothing to offer but his heart, and that seemed like too little to win the affection of someone as remarkable as Princess Lyra. Still, the thought of her haunted him. His mind kept circling back to one question: what if? The day of the royal marriage ceremony arrived. Zurin's capital was filled with luxury, with ships arriving from every corner of the galaxy. Nobles, kings, and warriors, each one more powerful than the last, paraded before the princess. They presented gifts, offered alliances, and tried to impress her with displays of strength and wealth. But with each passing suitor, Lyra grew more disillusioned. None of them captured her heart. All they wanted was power. Marcus stood quietly at the back of the grand hall, observing the chaos with a mixture of awe and discomfort. He didn't belong here, he knew that. He was just one man among a crowd of powerful figures. But he couldn't shake the feeling that if he didn't at least try, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The princess appeared at the center of the hall, her long silver hair shimmering under the soft light. Her presence commanded attention, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. She was a vision of grace, yet her eyes were distant, as though she had already given up on the idea of finding someone who truly understood her. As the suitors continued to present themselves, Marcus found his courage faltering. What could he possibly offer her that the others hadn't already? The ceremony continued, but Marcus couldn't stop staring at the princess. She looked so lonely. Even surrounded by all this grandeur, she seemed to be searching for something, or someone. Finally, he couldn't stand it any longer. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to do it. He had to show her that courage wasn't defined by how much power you had, but by the willingness to risk everything for something you believed in. As he approached the front, he felt every eye in the room turn toward him. The whispers began almost immediately. Who was this human, and why was he stepping forward like this? The other suitors eyed him with disdain. He was nothing compared to them, they thought. What could he possibly offer her? But none of that mattered to Marcus. All that mattered was the way Lyra was looking at him, curious, intrigued, but cautious. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but full of resolve. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "I know I am nothing compared to the powerful beings who stand before you. I have no wealth, no army to command, no title to my name, but I offer you something they cannot, my heart." The room fell silent. The princess's eyes widened, and for a brief moment Marcus could see something in her gaze, something like hope. "I do not seek power, Your Highness," he continued. "I seek only to show you that courage is not about strength but about love. If you'll have me, I would give you everything I have, not because of what it will bring me, but because I believe in you." There was a long pause, and for a moment Marcus feared he had made a fool of himself. But then, to his astonishment, Princess Lyra stepped forward, her violet eyes searching his face. "You are bold," she said quietly, "and that is rare." "I know I am not what you were expecting," Marcus replied, his voice soft. "But I will not lie to you. I am not here for political gain or power. I am here because I believe that even in this vast, strange universe, there is something worth fighting for, and that is you." The princess was silent for a moment. The room was still, every being in the hall holding its breath. Lyra's gaze never left Marcus's face. Finally, she spoke. "Very well," she said softly, her voice carrying through the hall. "We shall see if your courage matches your words." With that, she motioned for him to follow her. The crowd parted, and Marcus's heart leapt in his chest. Could this be real? Was this really happening? As he followed her into a private chamber, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had done it. He had taken the first step toward something greater than he had ever imagined, and whether or not he succeeded, he knew he would never regret this moment. Lyra turned to him once they were alone. "You are not what I expected," she said, her voice quiet. "But I sense something in you, something that others lack. Maybe you have the courage to be what I need." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "I am not perfect," he said, "but I will never stop trying." The princess studied him for a moment longer, then smiled softly. "Then let us see if your courage is enough." And so, in that quiet chamber with the entire galaxy watching, the first step was taken. Marcus stood at the entrance of the royal chambers, his heart pounding. Princess Lyra had asked him to follow her, and he had done so without hesitation. Now, he was about to face the challenge of his life, one he had never imagined in his wildest dreams. The galaxy watched, and the fate of two worlds seemed to hang on the line. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with silence. Lyra turned to face him, her violet eyes studying him with a quiet intensity. She had already made her decision. He would be her partner, not because of his power, but because of his heart. But now she needed to know if he was truly worthy of that trust. "Your courage has brought you this far, Marcus," she said softly, her voice carrying an air of finality. "But I cannot marry someone who cannot prove they are capable of standing by my side in the most difficult of times. The galaxy is filled with challenges, dangers, and enemies. If you are to be my partner, you must prove that you are not just a man of words, but a man of action. Marcus swallowed hard, but there was no fear in his chest, just determination. He had come this far. He wasn't about to back down now. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice steady. Lyra's gaze softened and she nodded. "The galactic trials," she said simply. Marcus blinked. He had heard of the trials before, of course. They were legendary, a series of challenges that tested the worthiness of any who sought to prove themselves in the eyes of the royal family. Few had ever survived, and fewer still had succeeded in winning the trials and the princess's favor, but no one had ever attempted them under the circumstances that now surrounded him. No human had ever been asked to take them. Before he could say anything, Lyra held up a hand. "These trials are not about strength or combat alone. They are about wisdom, courage, and sacrifice. I will not put you in danger for my amusement, but you must pass these tests to show that you can stand beside me as an equal." Marcus nodded. He knew what he had to do. The first trial took place on the surface of a barren, windswept planet called Vortha. The planet was a graveyard of ancient civilizations, broken ruins scattered across vast deserts, where the winds whispered of long-forgotten secrets. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Your task is simple," she said. "In the center of this wasteland lies an artifact, a relic of my people lost long ago. Bring it back to me, but beware. The planet is treacherous, and the artifact is guarded by the Vortha sand beasts." Marcus glanced at the horizon, where dark shapes moved across the sand. He could hear the distant growls of the creatures that roamed the planet, but he didn't flinch. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This wasn't a battle for survival, it was a test of his heart. "I will return with it," he said, more to himself than to Lyra. With no further words, he set off into the desert. The sand swirled around him, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. But his instincts guided him, and he followed the faintest trail that led deeper into the wasteland. Hours passed, and the wind howled as the sun sank lower in the sky. The temperature dropped rapidly and his body began to tire, yet he pressed on. Suddenly, he heard the unmistakable sound of growling, a low, rumbling noise that grew louder by the second. The sand beasts were closing in. Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew that the trials were not meant to be easy, and he could not afford to let fear take hold. He sprinted toward a rocky outcrop ahead, hoping to find some shelter from the beasts. He could hear their claws scratching the sand, drawing closer with each passing moment. As he reached the rocks, he turned to face them. There were 3 sand beasts, massive creatures with sleek, armored hides and glowing red eyes. They circled him, growling menacingly. Marcus's heart raced, but his mind stayed calm. He had no weapon, only his courage and his wit. He waited, his eyes locked on the creatures, calculating his next move. The first beast lunged and Marcus sidestepped, barely avoiding the creature's claws. The second beast struck from the other side, but Marcus ducked, rolling to the ground and using the momentum to push himself back onto his feet. He saw a glimmer of light in the distance, the artifact. It lay beyond the beasts, partially buried in the sand. He knew he had to reach it. With a deep breath, he sprinted toward it, the beasts in hot pursuit. But as he reached the relic, he made a split-second decision. Instead of grabbing it immediately, he turned and faced the sand beasts. They were upon him now, but he had no intention of fighting them head-on. Instead, he used the terrain to his advantage. He climbed a nearby rock outcrop and lured the beasts up after him. With a final burst of energy, Marcus leapt to a higher ledge, out of their reach. The beasts, unable to climb, circled below, growling in frustration. The plan had worked, but it wasn't over. The artifact glowed with a strange light as Marcus reached out to touch it. As soon as his hand made contact, the ground trembled beneath him. The sand beasts howled, but Marcus remained focused. The relic was more than just an object. It was a key to understanding the power of Zurin's ancient civilization. It would take more than brute strength to master it. With the relic in hand, Marcus made his way back to Lyra, where the other suitors waited, their faces a mix of surprise and disbelief. No one expected the human diplomat to succeed, but Lyra watched him with a quiet smile, her eyes full of respect. "You have passed the first trial, Marcus," she said softly. "Not because you fought the beasts, but because you used your mind, your heart, and your courage. You did not give up, even when the odds were against you." Marcus's heart swelled with pride, but he knew the trials were far from over. This was only the beginning. The second trial took place on a moon known as Orcs. It was a place where time itself seemed to warp, days stretched into weeks, and moments felt like centuries. Lyra explained that this trial was not about physical endurance. Instead, it was a test of patience, of how one could deal with the passage of time without losing hope. Marcus stood on the surface of Orcs, his eyes fixed on a distant mountain peak. He had to reach it, but the path ahead was treacherous and winding, stretching on endlessly. Time seemed to play tricks on him. What felt like hours passed in what seemed like minutes, and yet there was no sign of progress. He felt the weight of isolation creeping in as the silence grew deeper. The other suitors had given up long ago, but Marcus pressed on, even as the minutes turned into days. He thought of Lyra, of her quiet strength, her fierce determination. He thought of the galaxy, of the trials he had already overcome, and he knew that this journey was not just about proving himself to her. It was about proving to himself that he could endure, that he could conquer the doubts and fears that held him back. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity, Marcus reached the peak. The view before him was breathtaking. Stars stretched out in every direction, and for a moment he felt a deep connection to the vastness of the universe. He had made it not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because he had never given up. When he returned to Lyra, she was waiting for him, her expression unreadable. "You have passed the second trial, Marcus," she said, her voice soft. "You have shown patience and perseverance. You have learned that sometimes the hardest part of any journey is simply holding on long enough to reach the end." The trials were far from over, but Marcus had learned much about himself. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. He had learned that strength was not always physical. It could come from the heart, the mind, and the soul. And most importantly, he had learned that love, true love, required not just bravery but sacrifice. As the final trial approached, Marcus knew that he was no longer the same man who had stepped onto Zuran's soil. He had changed, and he was ready to face whatever came next.